Okay, very happy to bring on to the podcast now Brian Kenny. Brian hosts MLB Network's MLB Now weekdays at 2 p.m. If you are a baseball fan, you likely already watch MLB Network and you know who BK is. How's it going? Thank you so much for joining us.
Good, Andrew. I'm doing well. Just off a ball game last night. It was a lot of fun to call a game. I got Mets and Braves coming up. Did Braves and Cubs last night. So yeah, calling a game is a blast. So no, I'm doing well.
You like calling the games? You like doing it?
It's great, really is. I've called games going back to, minor league baseball, Hudson Valley Renegades, upstate, which is now a Yankee affiliate.
Yep.
Back in the '90s, called games with Jim Bouton. Actually,
oh wow, it's way back.
Yes, called games with him, and then through ESPN, mostly as an anchor, doing Sports Center, Friday Night Fights, all that stuff. Baseball Tonight, obviously. But called some Wednesday Night Baseball. And then at the network, like last 2 years, called a lot of games MLB Now style or Sabercast or Statcast. But a lot of that was in the studio. So like yesterday, I had to think about it. Yesterday from a ballpark, like sitting in the catbird seat, as Red Barber called it, and calling a game. It had been a while. So there's nothing like being at a major league stadium, in a ballpark. There's nothing like it. So yeah, I have a true love for it and really enjoy it.
You had to shake the rust off, remember the old reps to call the game?
Well, you know what? It's funny. Like, I think I've called enough games and called enough boxing. I've been doing boxing. I still call boxing for Fox Sports, doing blow by blow. So I've been doing that for 3 years. I was calling DAZN boxing for 2 years before that. So like I'm used to that, and yet there's nothing like it when you're sitting in the game and you have all the traffic. And suddenly the game's moving fast. Like it's weird. Like I know watching I think that when I'm watching, I watch so much baseball and I'm always listening to the play-by-play guys and the team. And you're thinking things are moving slow, but for the play-by-play guy, things are moving fast. And I was amazed last night just calling the game how, because there is so much traffic, things to get in, how fast the game, before you know it's like 2 outs, 2 strikes, and you're like, whoa, I better not, tee up Dan Plesac with a story. So, like anything else, like when you're calling the game, it's faster than you think.
It's certainly an art form. I remember I was always a huge baseball fan, obviously, and always wanted to do something in baseball media. I would call games like just in my basement, just watching on TV. And
you'd call like just to yourself, or
to myself? Or? Yeah, to myself. Yeah, no recorder, no nothing. Didn't have any of that. Just would call it as it was happening. Practicing when I was like 9 years old. And yeah, I would even, mess up to myself and be like, I shouldn't have said that.
Right. Oh, always. And that's, it's funny that you say that. You know what that reminds me of? I want some way back story apropos of nothing. When I was first a college and a Cub reporter, I was covering the New York Islanders. And so I was, right out of school and then working for WLIG, Channel 55 on Long Island. Okay. It was my first job out of school. And I used to go to Nassau Coliseum, and this was the heyday. This was still Trottier, Mike Bossy, Clark Gillies, all the guys, the Stanley Cup champion team. And there, sitting in the press box, was a young Kenny Albert.
Wow.
Calling games. He's in a suit jacket. He's like 14, 15 years old. He's in his sport coat, suit jacket. This young guy, and he's calling games into his tape recorder. What we used to call a tape recorder,
yep.
Play record. And he'd always be there calling games, but. That's Marv Albert's son, and by the time he got to be probably 19 years old, he could call games. And so, you practicing at home works. You got to practice. You got to focus on it, and there's no substitute for actually doing it.
Right, absolutely, and it's the 10,000 hours theory, right? You get enough reps under your belt, and then it's just second nature. Well, I'm glad we're talking to you with a few games under our belt this season, about a month of baseball. I know we were supposed to have you on a couple weeks back, but I'm actually glad it's happening now because we can, there's some context to what we've been watching. And the Yankees are in first place. First time they've been in first place, sole possession in over a year. They lead the American League in run differential. So it's been a turnaround over the past week. I know they have a couple sweeps, but I was just talking on a most recent episode that the team feels a little bit different than the last couple of years, and I think that's a positive thing. How do you assess how the Yankees have done so far, and specifically how the moves that they made in the offseason, decisions that they made to switch up the lineup have panned out so far?
I don't know how aware you are of the all MLB Now team. on MLB Now, I started putting together not our favorite players, but a team. And I actually started doing this, and with John Hart, who's a two-time executive of the year, was working with us last year on MLB Network. And I put together a team, a low-budget team of the guys I liked. But it's not just the guys I liked. It's specific types of players that I think you can win with. And look, in the real baseball world, what's expensive? Power. Power is expensive. So I put together a team that was hit for contact, had plate discipline. I want a low O swing percentage. I want plus fielding. I want the guy to play multiple positions. I want plus base running. And then I would also apply what I call cut of jib index, which is my own proprietary nonsense number.
Yep.
But you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
I want a guy who can play. I want a guy who can play hard, that cares. You know who the captain of my team was?
Who?
Isaiah Kiner-Falefa.
Oh, okay. I was going to say LeMahieu, but IKF.
LeMahieu's excellent, in that form, I already can't afford DJ LeMahieu.
Yeah.
I can't spend that type of money. It was guys like Luis Guillorme of the Mets. It was Jonathan Villar, who was a little cheaper. He was $3 million last year. In the real world, this is not fantasy. This is $6 million this year with the Cubs. But last year, we interviewed IKF, actually. Do you call him IKF yet, or was that?
We've been calling him IKF. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is a mouthful to say a bunch of times.
And it's hard. That's why people don't remember him. He doesn't hit enough. But we interviewed him last year because I'm watching him and I'm just looking at his overall game and I'm like, this guy's fantastic. And then I started watching him and I realized there's a reason his base running matters. And I'll just say on an aside, this is though appropriate to what I'm talking about. I talked to Walt Weiss yesterday, bench coach of the Atlanta Braves, former Rookie of the Year, played baseball in upstate New York. He's out of Suffolk. And we were talking about the winning kind of player. And he said, your baseball IQ and your desire shows up on the bases. And I think it was beautifully put. Have you seen Isaiah Kiner-Falefa slide into second on a ground ball?
Yeah.
He will break your leg going through. He's not dirty, but he is going into second hard. And he will take you out. And it's indicative of his overall game. So Kiner-Falefa, even though last year he ended up with an OPS plus of 85, right? Well below league average. League average is 100. Your fans probably know that. But he did everything else great. Not good, great. So when they made when he got traded, I thought, oh my, because I said Texas. If I'm Texas, I have all this money to spend. I asked the question last year, do I not go for Seager and Correa and just play with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa? And I got laughed at. I'm like, no. You can win with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. So when the Yankees finally made that trade and got him, I was like, oh, I hope they're not just picking him up as utility. Play him at shortstop. He was plus 10 defensive runs saved last year. Play him at shortstop. We saw what the Yankees looked like last year. You guys watch every game, right? You
Left
saw
side
what
of the infield
looked
was
like
brutal.
last year, right? And you saw when they briefly had Andrew Velasquez playing short.
Yeah.
You still have to have a guy who can play shortstop. Yeah. You get exposed. There's little outs here and there you don't make. Next thing you know, how'd we lose 4-3? We're so good. How'd we lose 9-8? We're so good. Well, guess what? You're not so good. And last year they were not so good.
No.
So I was very excited. Bottom line, very excited. You got the winner, and he's a below the radar winner. If I were the Yankees, I would just extend him now. I want this guy. By the way, he can catch.
I know. I don't think he's going to get behind the plate this year, but he can at least play some third base and some shortstop and some other positions. He can catch. He can catch.
No, but is it who am I thinking of? Who was the Yankee years ago? It wasn't Layrich, but who was the guy that could also catch? And it was always like, in a pinch, you only have to catch. Like if one catcher goes down and hurt, you don't have to go bring up a guy from the minors because this guy, I can't think of it.
Was it Luis Sojo?
No, there was another Yankee in the 90s or something. Oh man,
I'm ashamed I don't know this.
And he was, and the thing is, he caught could actually catch through the minors. Kiner-Falefa has caught, I think, 360 innings in the major leagues.
Right.
So it's not like, hey, he caught Legion ball if you have to. Well, no, he can catch. He's not Johnny Bench, but he can catch. And so he plays short. You mentioned third base and second base. By the way, he's plus at those positions. He's a plus fielder at these positions. So anyway, getting Anthony Rizzo, getting Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and Josh Donaldson, you're getting competitive guys. And I think since you watch the Yankees closely, there was a competitive fire issue last year. Just didn't have it. Had good players. Aaron Judge is fantastic, but didn't have that edge. I loved those signings. And it's not just chemistry, clubhouse guys. That's great. But Donaldson competes, Rizzo, contact, situational hitting, and now we see also for power. He has good at-bats. I want guys who have good at-bats.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference in the world.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. Like, and you mentioned you joked you have the what is it, the cut of the jib metric?
Cut of jib index. Yes.
Cut of jib index. That is something that I feel has gone out of the game too much in recent years. Like, I appreciate advanced metrics. I find them extremely valuable, especially when you're analyzing a player's performance over, a date range. But yes, the game still happens on the field between the lines. They're still human beings playing the game. And to your point of last year, and I even grouped 2020 and 2021 together, that roster of Yankees, there was something wrong with it. It was difficult to put your finger on it, but if you watched every day like we did, it was pretty glaringly obvious that there was something wrong with it and something needed to change. And going into this season, I said, listen, I don't know if the Yankees are going to be any better than they were last year, but I know they'll be different. And flat out, that's a positive thing, because what we saw last year didn't work. So this is different, and maybe it can work. And so far early in the season, through a month of games almost, it has worked, and that's, it could fall flat on its face a month later, but right now it's working.
Right. There's a lot of ways to go off that, but I think now that most of the industry, at least within the industry, I don't know how much, some media doesn't, some fans don't, follow the advanced metrics, but I don't even call it advanced metrics, just the proper language, getting on base, hitting for power, and even the things that we're talking about. Base running can be measured. It's not perfect, but it can be measured. Defense can be measured. Not perfect, but it can be measured. And I think once we're all talking the same language, like, I haven't changed my philosophy, but I used to rail about, hey, use objective data points. Let's not just say, oh, this guy's great, this guy's terrible, this guy. Be objective in who's good and who's not. But now that we're all talking that language of, if it's OPS plus, weighted runs created plus, if it's leveraged moments, if it's just like your on-base percentage, but you can measure contact. Like I said, good at-bats. But good at-bats can be kind of measured. Remember Brett Gardner years ago was one of the first, pitches per plate appearance guys.
Yeah.
Obviously, before him, the 90s Yankees that emerged, even starting with Wade Boggs, and then Jeter, Bernie. Getting through the Yankee lineup was torturous. And that's what they made. They grinded you, and they were excellent, but they also fought you once we're all measuring these things, and we know we can measure. Now, what's the difference? Like, where can your analysis go if you want to perceive, like the things you said, I can't quite put my finger on it? Well, it's watching the games and seeing how they compete. So I think that's kind of where we are now, where I look at it, and that's why I put together my All MLB Now team. And I put one together for this year too. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is still on it. Even with guys like J.P. Crawford, they're like that too. You want a shortstop like that. Nicky Lopez of the Royals. Again, you can measure these things. How does a guy compete? Because you're right, there are small things on the field all around that add up to bases. And how good is a guy's at bats when there's men in scoring position? You're not always going to succeed, but are you having those good at bats? And most of the time, you can see the difference between, even if they had the same numbers, which they don't. Anthony Rizzo and Giancarlo Stanton have very different at bats.
Oh yeah.
Which would you rather have? You'd have Rizzo. Even if they had the same OPS plus at the end, one guy competes within the at bat, the other guy will either crush you or you wipe him out. I'd rather have the guy that just competes and lands in the same spot.
But now they complement one another. And with the way the Yankees lineup is right now, just taking the middle of the order, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton. Rizzo is a nice breakup of Judge and Stanton, who are still phenomenal players, impact players, but Rizzo doesn't strike out a lot. He puts the ball in play. He's going to make the pitcher work, and I think he's perfectly designed for Yankee Stadium. But it's a breakup of the lineup that didn't have that the last couple of years. It was Judge, Stanton, Voit, and it was just all down the line, the same type of players. When it went right and they hit 6 home runs in the game, it was a hell of a lot of fun, and they scored 12 runs, but that didn't happen that often, and there was too many strikeouts in it. And to I think you mentioned earlier, the defense, defense is just significantly better, and trying to identify small moments in the season where you're like, this team is broken. I go back to a play that happened last year at Fenway Park. Luke Voit makes a over the shoulder catch in foul territory down the first baseline. And it was a great catch, but there was a runner on third base, and he forgot about the runner on third base, who then tagged up and scored. And it's like those little moments in the season where you're like, that's just bad baseball. And I'm like ragging on Luke Voit. I don't dislike Luke Voit. It's just something was wrong, and it needed to change.
Baseball IQ matters, you know. Yeah. Are you old enough to have watched Don Mattingly?
So my real first baseball memories are 95 and 96, and that was obviously Mattingly ended in 95. I'm 34 years old.
So you arrived just as they were destroying the earth. Yes.
Yeah, I arrived just in time for Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, and all those guys. Yeah, I'm a product of the 90s dynasty.
Oh, good. No, Mattingly was that. It reminds me where you're looking for baseball IQ at first base. If you were 10 years older, you would have seen Mattingly and Keith Hernandez at first base in New York. And to this day, I haven't seen guys better. And that's what you're talking about, guys who have complete awareness of what's going on out on the field, and it makes a big, big difference. I think sometimes defense and base running don't even get enough, I think, credit, even when you're looking at WAR. I think, sometimes it was like only a few years ago, again, the hard thing to wrap your head around for a lot of fans and people in the media too, was that a guy who does all the little things is as good as a big-time slugger. Now we completely understand that. Like, I don't know, Starling Marte last year, right, who's now at the Mets. Like, with the stolen bases, with the ability to play center field, he's as good as some big slugger. We understand that now. And it wasn't all that long ago that, no matter what, let me give you the guy with the home runs and the RBIs. But now we see that. And I think, like, Hernandez and Mattingly, both strong Hall of Fame candidates, both are. I think they don't get enough credit. Defensively, they were so far above everybody else, they changed the game. They changed, like when you were playing them, they would alter what you could do. And that's rare. Even other good fielding first basemen, I'm just using this as an example. Paul Goldschmidt was quite good. Freddie Freeman now is
I thought
good.
Mark Teixeira was excellent.
Mark Teixeira was quite good, right. And then, so that's the top level. Albert Pujols, when he was younger, quite good at first base defensively. And yet, Mattingly and Hernandez were so far above those guys, even above like Jeff Bagwell, another guy who was probably one of the better guys I've ever seen. You couldn't bunt at all against Hernandez, not even up the third base line. Mattingly wasn't quite as aggressive as that, but he'd make IQ plays all over the field that you'd marvel at if you were watching it pitch by pitch. Just as an aside, right, there's it brought baseball IQ, fielding level, base running. These things win.
I think first base is an underrated defensive position. It makes the rest of the infield better. Rizzo's already saved like 4 throwing errors this year. And those are errors in the last couple of years for the Yankees. So people just think, stick the big guy at first base. Like anyone, we'll move Judge to first base in 6 years after they sign him to a long-term deal. That's still an important fielding position on the diamond.
No, it's vastly underrated. I'll give you another example now. I don't know how much they're doing it this year. Maybe not as much, but because Eric Hosmer's tearing it up for the Padres. Jake Cronenworth of the Padres, plus fielding second baseman. But when they were doing a platooning or Hosmer maybe was out, they'd put Cronenworth, a good fielding second baseman, at first base. And they went on this like tear at the time, like without Fernando Tatis. And a lot of it was like, wow, they are tight defensively. Even in a high run scoring environment, it's reasonably high now. There's no question that, defense at first base, you can put a mediocre guy there and be okay. When you put a very good guy there, you get better than okay. And maybe we undersell defense completely. I mentioned last year the Yankees looked good when they had Andrew Velazquez playing shortstop. And the guy couldn't hit at all. And yet, like, hey, we're kind of winning.
Right.
Stop and go, why is that? Are there things we don't quite understand? Or is it just kind of a real basic baseball principle of your defense, as they say, up the middle, but everywhere your defense matters, especially at these vital defensive positions.
What do you make of defensive metrics when they contradict one another? So IKF, you mentioned plus 10 DRS, but StatCast outs above average is not so favorable on IKF. when I see that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to use my eyes. And so far, my eyes have told me he can play shortstop. But like, what do you make of when the defensive metrics don't align?
Well, and there's always been conflicting metrics, especially at shortstop, because we do a thing called Top 10 right now on MLB Network.
Yeah,
every offseason.
It's the shredder, right?
The shredder, that's right.
Yeah.
So that for the last 10 years, I've especially at shortstop, where it's like, okay, defense matters a lot. Let me look at, and at the time it was for most of these years, it's been defensive runs saved or UZR, ultimate zone rating, which is on Fangraphs, and it used to be kind of the thing. Then defensive runs saved became like the state of the art. Now it's defensive runs saved, which uses a lot of scouts and outs above average, which is the StatCast metric. And the answer is, I don't know. The answer is, right, take in all the information and then try to use your eyes. Like, don't be blind to it. I know when I see it. But, there are guys in the past that you think, I don't think this defensive metric is doing this guy justice, and I don't quite know why. I think a lot of teams have their own proprietary metrics now that they look at that they're not sharing with us, because why would they? If I'm paying a group of young hotshots to go find this or scouts to find this, I wouldn't be sharing it. And I think they go through the same thing, collect everything and try to make the best possible decision. And I don't know why sometimes they do, but there's no question at shortstop, that's where there is often a wide discrepancy between the two. Not always, but more often than other positions, because there's more reps. It's a higher, data sample.
And that's what the Yankees tried to do at catcher too. Remove Sanchez, who was, I think, becoming a problem defensively, and pitchers were no longer wanting to throw to him, and really focus efforts on good framers. And that's what Higashioka and Trevino are, and Rortvedt, if he ever does get on the field for them, good framers of the baseball. And that seems to be a really huge trend, because there's not many offensive catchers in the league anymore.
No.
And so teams are just trying to find good framers.
I always look at, along those lines, for a few years, I kept looking at, like, what are the Rays doing? I always say, like, how do you win? What are the Rays up to? And the Rays, for a few years, I don't know as much anymore, because if you can happen into or draft or develop a catcher who can also hit, yeah, do it. But they were like going out and they kept getting one of the Molina brothers. They just kept doing it. And it was like, this guy's not hitting at all. And the Rays did not care. They saw this at the kind of the early days of pitch framing to understand it, when we weren't sure, like, how much does pitch framing matter? And it's still kind of a, controversial topic. But I think what they found about, 8 years ago or so, was that it mattered as much as we ever thought when we're watching the game. The 1-1 pitch becomes a 2-1 or a 1-2, makes a huge difference. And what they found, I think it was Mike Fast who first, did this on, I think, Baseball Prospectus. Maybe it was Fangraphs, forgive me if I'm wrong. But he found, like, no, it could be worth like 20 to 30 runs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which is like, I don't know, Ozzie Smith at shortstop in his best year. It's like, what?
Yeah.
But maybe it is, and I know that's what the Rays were doing that. And across the league, there's a lot of teams that have this no hitting catcher, and they're not adding guys. And we've got to fix this. Nope, we're good. Let's play with this guy.
And it wasn't that long ago that there were, I think it was like maybe even the golden age of offensive catchers in baseball in the 2000s and the 2010s, and that's just completely gone away.
As far as what? As far as
just the amount of offensive catchers in the league, when you think of like Posada and Mauer and then Posey,
Victor Martinez.
There was just, it seemed like there was like at least 7 or 8 good offensive catchers in baseball in that 10 to 15 year span.
And
like really good offensive catchers.
I think it might be, it's a combination of things. Because again, when we do top 10 right now, where we rank the top 10 players at each position, we see the ebb and flow of talent. Like shortstop used to be, Troy Tulowitzki would be 1, Jose Reyes 2, and then it would fall off the cliff. And there were very few offensive shortstops. Now there's a ton. Catcher went from a lot of good hitters to now it's like very few. I think it might be the run scoring environment. You're talking about the 2000s and the late 90s. Run scoring jumps up, home runs jump up, record-breaking home runs. So in that environment, in an 8-5 ball game, your pitch framing doesn't quite matter as much. In a lower run scoring environment, every pitch does matter. a lot more. And offense, you can get away with it, the low run scoring, and maybe that's what we're looking at now. Also, I also wonder, I just want to throw in, it might be just development. Like, who knows what class of player, when they're 12 or 13, are choosing catcher or not choosing catcher. Like Bryce Harper was a catcher, but maybe when you identify your super kid who's playing travel ball, and that's where the major leaguers are coming from, right? International or travel ball in the U.S. Those kids who are playing 300 games a year. I don't even know how many. Probably it's some absurd number. That's why we're getting all our major leaguers from Georgia suburbs and Las Vegas. They're just playing year round. And maybe the super kid eventually, if it's my son, and I've got the super kid and he's catching, eventually I'm getting him out from behind the plate. We don't need you beat up, Bryce Harper. We want you out in the outfield slugging. You can pitch, play shortstop, play center, but you're not catching. I think that might be part of it too, where the kind of the Buster Posies of the world, there was very few that were staying behind the plate.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's maybe no longer a fast track to the majors that it might have been in that time, or maybe even you're going to get drafted higher if you're a catcher, just because that's a premium position and a harder position to find.
By the way, as you bring that up, you know who picked up catching so he could get to the major leagues?
Who?
Isaiah Kinder-Falefa.
Oh, okay.
He told me that. He said, I'm on my way up. I'm in the minors, and I thought, yeah, maybe I make it, maybe I don't. But if I catch, and he started catching.
Yeah.
But that shows you the level of competitive fire in this guy. Let me learn to catch.
I have to always say this. I'm not comparing myself to professional baseball players, but I was a catcher in high school. It's not fun to do, okay? It's not fun to do. It's not fun to do for 6 months a year in the 95-degree sun. It's just not freaking fun to do.
It beats you up. No, it's physically debilitating. And we see that, by the way, every year when we're doing top 10 right now in catchers. I found myself, I have to write a little bio for each guy. And I found myself writing for like 6 out of the 10 guys. He got off to a hot start, and then he faded down the stretch. I'm like, this is everybody. Everybody behind the plate starts off great and then fade down the stretch. And that's why we have catchers playing, 120, 128 games now.
Which makes total sense.
You try to save these guys if they can hit a little bit.
Speaking of guys that were ranked near the top of the top 10, Joey Gallo, not off to a good start, but I think he was even ranked number 1 on the Shredders list of left fielders.
Yeah, he was. Guess where I had him?
Oh, where did you have him?
Unranked.
Oh, unranked. Okay, so not even. Damn. All right. I didn't think you'd be that low on him. I thought you'd be, because he does do the thing about Gallo that actually, like, you have to give him credit for. Like, he can run, he can play some defense. So I figured those would maybe be enough to get him at least ranked in the top 10 for you.
I have to say, seeing him with the Yankees influenced me. And I said during the show when we aired it in January, February, maybe when the lockout ended, this is the player like in 1999 when I'm doing Baseball Tonight, and I'm the advocate of metrics and defensive metrics and on base and the value of all these things. I would have been advocating, a player like Joey Gallo, like Adam Dunn. Like Adam Dunn was my guy. Everyone was down, Adam Dunn can't play baseball. I'm like, Adam Dunn hits 40 homers and walks 100 times a year. He cannot be bad or mediocre. That's great. It's not good. It's great. 40 homers, 100 walks. Do you understand that? And kind of the industry didn't understand that. Now it does. However, now I've wrapped around where it's like, where's the consistency of performance? How are his at-bats? And I just saw too many bad at-bats. And I forget now exactly why I had 6 through 10 in left field. It wasn't a particularly strong field, but it was filled with guys like Marcell Ozuna. And I had to think, who do I want actually for 6 months? Do I want Joey Gallo and, kind of take a shot at him regaining that form that he had for kind of a brief period of time in the majors where he played great? He has outrageous defensive numbers, not good, great. Or would I rather ride with a guy who's just a little more consistent, doesn't have that high ceiling? I'm now like really leaning toward the guys who are more consistent that I know are going to give me the good at-bats and the good production because, there's so many at-bats where Gallo just leaves you cold.
Yeah, it's non-competitive. There's a stat that I actually saw this morning. I think Joel Sherman put it in an article. Between Donaldson and Gallo, they've combined to go 2 for 74 with 52 strikeouts and 2 strike counts. So Yeah, once it's just non-competitive at bats, they're getting behind early, and both of those guys should be guys that are working the count and getting on base. Like, I know Gallo's never going to hit 275 or anything like that, but he should walk a lot and find himself in some good hitter counts, and he's just not.
I'm trying to find my list now because I can defend a little bit. I just to illustrate, as long as we're podcasting, right?
Yeah.
We have this. We have this. Here's my early list. We have this. All right. So here's the bottom of my left field list. Right. Brandon Nimmo, Marcell Ozuna, Eloy Jimenez, Austin Meadows. Do I want those guys or do I want Joey Gallo? For 6 months this summer, right now, we're only doing this like 1 year. I'd rather have those guys, or Kyle Schwarber was number 4 on my list. I'd rather have those guys than Joey Gallo. No, I'm not looking to slight him, but I'm looking at him saying, he put up some good numbers for like brief periods. Again, they're streaky players, and he at his ceiling, he's at the top. But I use the word it's like code. He's a mercurial player, which kind of means when it's bad, it's really bad.
Really bad.
I think, not just as analysts or fans, I think in the real world that's even bigger than you and I just talking about it. Like in the real world where you're in the grind of everyday baseball and a guy goes 0 for 4 with 4 empty at bats, it's like, man, that was a killer. Or right, in tough counts, they're done. They have no shot. It's like, no, I've got to be able to do better than that.
And he just looks uncomfortable. He anytime they do close-ups of him in the field or in the dugout, I mean, I don't know how much to make of this, but he just looks uncomfortable. Like he's having a terrible time. And he's hitting whatever, 130. I'm sure he is having a terrible time.
Yeah.
But it's very glaring that he's struggling, and it seems to be, weighing on him.
And that happens. I mean, people always blame New York. I maintain, because I've basically lived here my whole life in the New York or New York metro area, and I push back against that. Yankee fans aren't really tough. I mean, Yankee fans are, demanding. They're on it. It's like, Boston fans are just as tough, but Met fans are much easier. They just want you to succeed. Like even the Lindor thing last year, where Lindor, it's tough coming to New York and in front of the fans. It's like, by the way, Lindor didn't see fans. When he first got there weren't fans, and then there was a smattering of fans, and then they just wanted him to succeed. And he had some terrible at bats, and his process was bad, and he played defense even though his metrics were good. There were plays where he looked like he just checked out, and eventually he got booed slightly. But I think it's a mischaracterization of the New York fan that they're just waiting to boo you and annihilate you. I mean, I haven't seen that with Joey Gallo. It's just like when you have a terrible at bat, there's going to be that dissatisfaction, that groan throughout the stadium that maybe leads to a couple of boos. But I push back that it's such a tough environment to play in.
No, and I think Yankee fans that they certainly are quick to boo, but they're also very quick to cheer. And Gallo hit 2 home runs this past week, and they were chanting his name because they want you to succeed. And
right, of course.
Yeah.
And look, also fans, you know what? Again, looking back to last year when they were booing Lindor and Baez, even though Javi Baez played well with the Mets, they did boo him a little bit. But guys who have bad at bats, who have you're rallying, you come from behind, you get 2 guys on, and you swing at the first pitch and you pop up. People recognize. That was a bad at bat. Like what? Like I know you're not going to succeed all the time, but there is oh man, come on, you got to take a pitch. This guy's been wild. Like work this.
Yep.
Use your IQ, and that's what I see fans get dissatisfied with, and that's why Gallo's had these, and Stanton, these bad. You used the word. It's your word. Uncompetitive, non-competitive.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a sec, where's compete in this at bat? You even see this year before Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, our guy. Before he even turned the corner, now he's well above average offensively. I think he's got a 108 OPS plus. But even in the beginning, when it was still kind of low and he wasn't hitting, his at-bats, he was battling. He was fighting. And that's what people, especially like in the smarter baseball towns, the more intense, not smarter, but more intense baseball towns, that's what they really respect.
Yankee fans are going to eat it up, and they've already really gotten behind IKF, but like especially because there's fewer guys in the league like that now, Yankee fans are going to love that. I want to ask you, so the Orioles shifted on Gallo the other day. I'm sure you saw this. One infielder had his feet on the dirt. Everyone else was in the outfield. They had 4 actual outfielders and then a short right fielder. Like this is nothing new with Joey Gallo.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you stand on potentially banning or restricting the shift?
I so hate that. And I see it gaining momentum, and I'm so against it. I'm so against like an artificial regulation of the game, especially applied intelligence. Now more than ever, teams win and lose based on their entire organization. And that's part of the intelligence unit. It's just like why I was not a fan of the National League going to the DH. I like to see strategy and tactics in the game, and shifting is a big part of it. And and it's become the low-hanging fruit, just like the DH. We got to fix baseball. We got to fix baseball. You go for the easy solutions. By the way, like the main solution is bring the pitch clock up. Pitch clock works. Pitch clock is great. Do it. Beyond that, it's like, well, let's stop the shift. Seiya Suzuki, by the way, I called a ball game with him last night. All right, Cubs and Braves. You know how often teams have shifted on Seiya Suzuki?
None.
0 times. Now, this guy's obviously an excellent professional hitter. He comes from Japan, 9 years in Hiroshima. He's excellent. But how come this guy arrived and he doesn't need protection from the shift?
Yeah.
This guy's here 3 weeks. Week 1, no one's shifting on him. He sprays the ball to all fields, can't shift on him. So don't we want to see more of those players? And if you ban the shift, what you're doing is not giving proper value. You're devaluing the type of player you say you want. So why are we doing that?
Well, not you. But that doesn't seem what teams have been, the types of players that teams have been building their rosters with. Because for the past 6-7 years, we've seen more and more shifts and more players that are just trying to hit the ball out. And it's also, I think, a product of the baseball is been designed to hit the ball out, and it's strikeouts and home runs. And so, general managers have built rosters of guys that don't spray the ball around the field.
Right, and the whole system is designed for that. You're incentivized to do it. And so what are we doing? We're emboldening and we're allowing those general managers and the decision makers to get those players protected. It's like a tariff. We're going to protect you. It's a protection.
It's protecting the Joey Gallos of the world. Yeah. So you're under the belief that if you keep the shift the way it is, it's going to eventually regulate itself, and general managers are going to have to come around and build more rosters that have players that can hit to all fields.
Right. Now, correct. I am stunned. I was talking to Brian Snitker and Walt Weiss of the Braves about this. We all said, hey, when this first started happening, like 2012, extreme shifts, the Astros, the Rays, they did it famously, befuddling A-Rod and Teixeira. They're hitting it right to guys who are standing there in the field. How could this be? Don't you want that kind of baseball? They said, and I thought this too. Hey, you know what? Very quickly, the game will adapt and there'll be a counter strategy. And we haven't seen it. But then slowly, even now, we saw the Guardians play the other week, right? And Stephen Kwan, a guy like that, or Miles Straw, the guy who went to fight the Bronx. These guys, are the kind of the nice little player, the scrappy contact player, and that sort of thing. You need to try to incentivize teams to promote that type of guy, and not just go after the next Joey Gallo. I hate to keep using him, but right. Say you see a young Stanton or Gallo, or you see a good contact hitter. If you're going to ban shifts, then it's a no-brainer. Give me Joey Gallo. So if you want more of the all or nothing slugger who just pulls the ball, and if you want more of him, then ban the shift. If you want to hope and pray that maybe there's a couple of Tony Gwynns out there, or a guy like Jose Altuve, who is probably that Tony Gwynn, Rod Carew-like player who says, let me see, how do I get promoted? How do I get paid? I got to start swinging for the fences, baby. I'm going to sell out. So we lose a whole generation of Rod Carews when it's beautiful to watch when you see it. So if you like that type of player and that type of baseball, don't ban the shift.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it that I haven't really heard, but I do see your point. Joey Gallo, though, is the extreme, right? There's also like plenty of players who aren't as extreme as Joey Gallo getting shifted on, and maybe it means 10 or 12 more base hits for them a year. And isn't like that's what baseball's going for? More, they keep saying more balls in play, more balls in play.
Well, there's other ways of doing like that. Those two things don't go together. And I have Joel Sherman on MLB Now all the time, and he's a very smart baseball guy. But I completely disagree with him. He wants to ban the 4-man outfield. He wants to ban the shift. He's in favor of baseball doing that. And again, I think it's a kind of a quick fix scheme where it'll feel right, it'll feel good in the moment, but what you're doing is you are eliminating that kid who's now 16, 17 years old, who's making a choice. Do I have to get huge and hit bombs? Do I go for, my exit velocity, or do I try to hit to all fields and be a well-rounded, high IQ player? General managers are going to do what they think works for them. That'll save their job. So you're going to look at that. You're going to look for a guy who tattoos the ball, and all the things we complain about, that it's all or nothing, it's strikeouts and home runs, there's no contact, there's no athleticism on the field, all those things that we say we want, they all get, the good things, they all get squelched if you ban the shift, because you're protecting the left-handed slugger. Righties too, but we're protecting that all or nothing, pull, launch angle guy that we say we don't like. We're protecting that guy.
The last thing I want to talk to you about is the 3,000 hit club, Miguel Cabrera just getting there. And I was looking at the active hit leaders, and I don't think any of the current guys are going to get there. Like, no one's even really close. I think Cano is the closest, and he's not getting 400 more hits. The best player of our generation, Mike Trout, isn't even halfway there. So is the 3,000 hit club dying like the 300 win club?
Yes. I was surprised too. I did an essay on this last week. I was very surprised because I naturally thought, okay, who's next? Figuring there'd be a list of guys there. And you're right. Cano is the only guy within, striking distance. And he's 38 or 39, and he's sputtering to the end now. Yadier Molina, Joey Votto are at like 2,100 hits. They're 38 or 39. I think it's Nelson Cruz who's there too. And you've got to get down to Altuve has 1,700 something hits, but he's already 31. And then there's Trout, and then there's Manny Machado. And Trout gets hurt a lot now. We all thought Trout, if healthy, hits everything. 500 home runs, 3,000 hits, does everything, obviously. But he hasn't been playing full seasons. Machado is my best bet. But Manny Machado is going to have to do it. He only gets like 150 hits a year. He's a slugger. He will draw his base on balls. And right now he's playing 160 games a year, which is really in his favor. But, now he's, 30, I think he's 30 years old. He's going to have to be 40 years old and playing that type of volume to do it. So he's my best bet. But basically, I said this on the air. I was like, this is 3,000 hit club is finite. It's not, no one's getting there.
Yeah.
Especially the way you play baseball now. By the way,
right.
Also,
that's the real reason why.
It's walks, it's power, and all of that. You're not incentivized to do it. Now, by the way, there's a development happening in baseball right now that could change everything. The ball's not flying out at the same level. I know it's April, it's early, but if home runs don't quite sail out the way they have been, you play a little more of the smaller ball that's out there. And now you're incentivizing the Jose Altuves for the future. Hey, we don't want 30 homers out of you. We want 200 hits. And so, someone will have 3,000 hits eventually when we change the way we're playing, and it might be 30 years from now.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, someone's going to do it again in the course of history, but I don't know that it's going to be anyone that we're currently watching.
You're right. You're absolutely correct. It's not happening while we're young and springy. Let's say
the 200 hit season seems to be gone by the wayside too, and maybe that'll come back in a few years as well. But you've got to be 200 plus hits in your prime every single year to reach 3,000, or else it's just not going to happen. Unless you played 47 years old.
Right. No, I looked at with our researchers, like Tony Gwynn. I think he got there when he was like 40 or 41. Tony Gwynn. That's all he's doing.
Never swung and missed.
Yeah, he does. He's always hitting the ball to all fields. 200 hits, batting champion, the whole thing. And yet, he came up because he was like an all-round athlete. By the time he was playing Major League Baseball and becoming a starter, maybe he was 24, 25. So it's a little later. It's a little easier if you're, Machado playing at 19. You ring up those extra seasons. But there's like a normal, great player, your basic Hall of Fame hit machine, and he's 40 or 41 getting to 3,000 hits. It does point out like how great Cabrera is, though, too. That he hits for power and still hits for average. But yeah, it's a rare thing, and I'm glad you like. I like the 3,000 hit club. That march through history is excellent.
I mean, yeah, and Miguel Cabrera. I mean, he's a Triple Crown winner. Not many Triple Crown winners get to the 3,000 hit club. So that just goes to show you the type of hitter that you just described. Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully you can catch up down the road.